In this tutorial, we're going to show you how you can take vector graphics that you bring in to After Effects and you can render them into 3D looks. Now it's kind of hard to see in this example that it's three-dimensional, but this is actually a three-dimensional object. And as we kind of scrub through, you can see a little bit of how it's a three-dimensional object that we have spinning and rotating. Now when we're dealing with 3D layers, particularly with extruding, which is what we're going to do here to make this look 3D, when you're working on this, you may want to down resolution your file, meaning that every time you work with 3D layers, it will have to render what it sees. This green line here, is it rendering at full speed, full resolution rather. And so as you guys may have already experienced in other tutorials, that sometimes it takes a little time for your computer to render everything. It'll take it a long time to render, and so to make that speed up a little bit, you may want to look at this at a partial resolution. That way you can work effectively, and then when you think you have it and you want to preview it, you see how it renders faster with it at a partial resolution. And then when you're ready to look at it at full speed, then you can change your resolution back to full, allow it to render through, and then you'll be able to see it render at full speed. So just take into account that when you render in 3D in After Effects, it takes a little while for it to render, and your computer needs to have enough processor speed, enough RAM in a good video card in order to do this. So let's go ahead and get started. I've imported in a logo, and the logo itself is on two layers. There's the bottom half of the logo, and then there's the top half of the logo. I did this so that I knew once I cast a light on it and start doing three-dimensional work with it, it'd be nice if the letters actually were able to cast a shadow of some kind. So I'm going to start by sizing these guys down a bit. So I'm selecting both of them, holding my Shift key, and sizing them down to where they fit into the screen. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename these so that I can understand what they are. By selecting it, hitting enter, and then simply retyping whatever I want it to say. Now, the next thing I have to do is I have to set these up so that I can render them in 3D. The first step is selecting the layer, going up to Layer, and select Create Shapes from Vector Layer. And then what this does is it creates a new layer and then automatically turns off your vector artwork. And that you can see it creates kind of like a little path around it. So let's go ahead and do that with our second one, the bottom half. Oops. Go to Layer, Create Shapes from Vector Layer, and there we have it. I'm going to move it right underneath it, and then technically I don't need these anymore, but we'll just leave them there. And so now what I want to do is I need to set these as a 3D layer. That's what's going to allow me to do what they call extruding, meaning that I can make it look more solid. To kind of understand that, right next to where I adjust the resolution, you'll see that I have a 3D pop-up for my view. Right now I'm looking at it from the front, But if I look at it from the top, you'll see that nothing really is going to happen because it's not three-dimensional yet. To make it three-dimensional, I select the layer, and then right here, you'll see this little cube. I'm going to want to turn that cube on, and that makes it a three-dimensional layer. Before you panic, I'll show you what happened to the box. The bottom. We're going to change that to 3D as well. And now when I change my view to the top, you'll see it's a thin line because they're still not three-dimensional. They just exist in a three-dimensional space right now. And right now, I have the top, and it's right on top of the back part of this logo. And as you can see, it's there, but they're occupying the same space. To fix that, we'll select the top. I'll go and switch my view to top. And I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. And you see this is the back of my logo, and this is the letters on top. So that now when I look at it from the front view, there it is. I'm going to go back to the top view for a second because I'm going to scooch this over just a little bit more. About there is fine. We'll go back to the front view. So now that they're 3D layers and they're ready for me to manipulate, I'm ready to start trying to extrude, meaning thickness. We'll start with the back so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Since it's a 3D layer now, when I open it up, I have my contents, which is everything that is used to create this. So basically 2 graphic pieces. You're never really going to worry about the contents for this particular thing, but I have the transformation, which allows me to spin or rotate or move this up, down, or closer or farther away. Then I have my geometry options, and this is where I can start doing the extrusion, and you can even see right here, extrusion depth. I can put bevels on these as well to create chiseled looks. We're going to start with the extrusion depth, and before I do it, let me just show you from the top. We're working on the back part of the logo, and see how it's basically a thin line. Let's jump this to about 25. And see how now all of a sudden it's got thickness, and now it's more of a truth. It's more than occupying 3D space. It is now a 3D object, and I can continue to increase this, but just keep in mind the thicker that you make these things, the more it's going to take to render. The same thing with the bevel. I'm not going to have a bevel on this, but I might want one on the layer that's in front so that when I cast the light on this in another tutorial, the thickness of it will cast a shadow on the background. So let's go to my geometry. Let's select my extrusion. Make it about 22, and now it's got a thickness to it. And I might put a bevel on these guys. And I only have a couple to choose from, and I recommend that you kind of play around with them and see what you like. We'll just select convex. And you don't want to make the bevel too thick because then it starts closing up everything, particularly fine details. Okay. Okay, so we have our extrusion set up. Let's go ahead and set this to full. And as you can see, it takes a little while for it to process everything. You can see by the thickness of the bevel, it really closed up a lot in this logo, particularly the fine details, which I warned you about. So I might go back to the top, and I might lower or even take off the bevel, but we're just going to lower it. And about half of it. Let it process out. And it's still kind of closing it up a little bit. So to kind of put this in perspective a little, you may plan out a client's logo a little bit more by looking at it. Once you've kind of played around with this, understanding how it works, then you may plan out the logo kind of like what I did in terms of separating this from the background. So let's lower it a little bit more. And actually, let me try different bevels so we can kind of see what they do. All right. Now, granted, with it being set so low of a bevel, it kind of looks like nothing's really happened, but you just have to trust me that once you set a background, a three-dimensional background in here, as well as a light source in here, when things start casting shadows, you'll actually start to see that it can, it's actually got depth to it. Okay, so that's pretty much how you create Extrude Graphics in Adobe After Effects.